Good evening, everyone, and welcome to New England Learns free webinar series. New England Learns is working as a partner with New Hampshire STE, which is now New Hampshire Supporting Technology Using Educators, which is a partner of the International Society for Technology and Education and ASCD, who's also working on changing their name. We changed our name as a request by ISTE and ASCD, and we're working towards redeveloping our nonprofit status and making sure that our audience can find us. Reminder that this series is designed to provide free professional development to educators in the New England states and beyond. We invite and welcome everyone interested to attend our webinars and share the recordings widely. You're welcome to share all the links that we'll provide afterwards. If you're on social media, we use the handles and hashtags at NELearns, hashtag NELearns webinars, and hashtag forward to school with the number 2. Is my philosophy is we can never go back, and I wish we would give up the go back to school kind of thing in September. We have to go forward to school. My name is Gabby Richard Harrington. I'm the president of New England Learns, and I'll be your host tonight. I'm expecting a friend to come and help moderate. We'll see if she can arrive tonight. Everyone present at the live session will get a certificate of attendance. All who registered will be sent the links as well. So if you're listening to the recording, you can complete a quick exit ticket, which will trigger an email that includes the attendance certificate and all the links. And again, we give you permission to share all the links as widely as possible. Today is December 3rd, 2025, and I'm pleased to be sharing the 40th anniversary of Critical Skills Classroom with our presenter, Laura Thomas. Laura is a published award-winning educator. She joined the education department faculty at Antioch, New England in 2002 after a decade of teaching high school English, debate, theater, and speech. Very interesting combination. She teaches and advises students in the Experienced Educators program with a particular focus on PBL, which I assume is project-based learning. That acronym is used so many times now. Critical Skills Classroom Concentration and its related programs in STEAM. Her primary areas of study center on the development of teachers' individual pedagogical approaches, social justice, and equity in school restructuring, particularly in rural schools, resistance to change, and student-centered classroom practice. In 2020, she completed a 4-year clinical experience as a school librarian at Harrisville Wells Memorial School. She serves as a community facilitator, consulting editor for Edutopia, and is an ISTE community leader. She's been published in EdWeek, Kappan, Journal of Staff Development, Edutopia, and is the author of Facilitating Authentic Learning with Corwin Press from 2011, as well as the newly published The Complete Guide to Critical Skills Classroom and its companion texts, and an introduction to the critical skills approach, Building of the Collaborative Learning Community, A Teacher's Guide to Experiential Learning, and the Challenge Design Handbook. We're so very excited to have you back. Welcome, Laura. And I will turn over the screen to you.
Okay. So it's great to be here. We were talking earlier that it's been a really long time since we've seen each other. And it's been a long time since, I think I was a guest on one of the webinars several years ago talking about building collaborative learning communities.
Yeah, sure.
So it's great to be back. It's really great to be back.
We're very glad to have you.
So do you want me to just jump in?
Yeah, sure.
That's the best way to do it. Okay, so as you mentioned, we are here talking about, the Critical Skills Classroom, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. And it's really interesting because figuring out how to count from what moment it's tricky, right? So this is technically our 40th anniversary at Antioch. We actually started in 1981 as the Corporate Council for Critical Skills, which was at the time a response to A Nation at Risk, which, now we know a lot more about that than we did then. But the Corporate Council was founded with this particular focus on how do we help students to become the kind of citizens that we want them to be? What do they need to know, do, be like? And because it's New Hampshire, they said, well, the curriculum is a matter of local control, right? Because it's all local control. And what we really want to talk about is the other stuff besides the academic content. So they brought a group of teachers together and said, make your list. What do we need students to be like, to know besides academic content? And a group of business leaders did the same. They put their lists side by side and they were almost identical. So then they asked the teachers to come up with a way to teach students how to do this stuff without adding anything extra on top of the existing curriculum. How do you embed this stuff so it's all happening at the same time? And of course, those lists were things like, problem solving, communication, collaboration, organization, self-management, the stuff that you would expect. Over the years, we grew across New England and then across the US and then overseas, and we changed our name. We became Education by Design for a while. In the UK, we were the Critical Skills Program. In the Netherlands, we are the Concept of Critical Skills. So we have a lot of different names in different places. Finally, we settled back on the name Critical Skills Classroom in the US. In 2019, Peter and Molly Eppig made a donation to Antioch with the specific focus on helping critical skills think into the future. And they created what we called the Critical Skills Scholars Initiative. And that provided some support for us to both reflect back, to look back on the past, and also to think about what's coming next, what the future will look like. And one of the things, this image is actually one of the very first experiential cycles we used in our materials. We call these snails because if you squint, it sort of looks like a snail. And this quote is actually from a teacher very early on in the critical skills work. It was one of our early participants. And at the beginning, teachers knew that this worked because they knew that teachers were building it. They had faith in it because while it was being informed by research, it was being created by people who were actually in the classroom with kids. And that hasn't changed. It is still by teachers, for teachers. It is still building on the research, but is really informed by teachers who are in the field right now. This is a more recent quote from one of our participants. And you can see this is a more recent version of the snail. You're gonna see a couple more versions that are a little bit different. The 4 broad ideas of critical skills and the 9 characteristics are different ways of helping people understand what the approach is about. The 4 broad ideas are really about providing building blocks for purposefully engaging students in learning, making classes run more smoothly, addressing whatever local learning goals are in place, be they state standards, local standards, standards that have been developed at the classroom level or through a board, depending on your structure, and also focusing on quality work. And those 9 characteristics sort of give shape to that. This is what it looks like often in a critical skills classroom, but this is all evolving and changing. As I went back through materials from the past, I saw the ways that these had shifted over time to reflect what teachers were actively doing in those moments in the classroom using this approach. All of those foundational pieces haven't changed. The research still stands behind what we do. The more research we do into how people learn, into how brains work, into how people process information and retain information, and all of the pieces around what everyone says that kids and adults should know how to do in order to be functional members of society None of those have changed. And they were at the heart of our work in 1982, and they're still on the minds of educators and employers. The skills and dispositions that we came up with back in 81 and that came to Antioch in 1986. But the list has shifted. There's some new stuff here. Curiosity and wonder was added as sort of a late addition in the late 90s, if I remember right. Some schools don't use these at all. We encourage folks to use their own list if they've got it. So some schools use habit of mind or virtues of a learner, or they might be really focused on higher order thinking skills or 21st century skills. The skills and dispositions can change and evolve depending on what individual schools' priorities are, but the process still works. So the process that we're teaching teachers to use works no matter what skill or disposition that you're focused on. And just like business people and community leaders, civic leaders, gosh, functional adults in the world know all those things that kids need to be able to do in order to sort of live lives that they would define themselves as successful in the world. We still know this is true. Classroom teachers still know that this is true. We need people who know how to solve problems and who know how to work together. So we knew all of this stuff, right? And we, coming into this work in 2019, I knew that everything I was reading, everything I was hearing was saying all this stuff is still good, but the world is different. And if there was ever a moment that made that clear, it was 2019 and 2020. So we got this funding from the Critical Skills Scholar, from the EPIGS to do this Critical Skills Scholars work. And then immediately the world shut down. And so we had to step back and think about how we wanted to do the work that they had charged us with doing. Because we knew that while a lot of our underpinnings were still solid, teachers and students' needs were changing. The world was changing. And we needed to figure out how we could be of service moving forward. So I was lucky because I got to go on sabbatical, which is a gift. I had been at Antioch for like 18 years, 19 years when I got my first sabbatical. And oh my gosh, it was wonderful. My sabbatical question was, is critical skills still relevant? What do teachers need? What do they want? How can we help? And so I started visiting schools and talking to teachers, some teachers who were current critical skills students, some folks who were alums, some folks who had been involved in the work at the very beginning. I visited about 15 teachers, and then I reviewed 40 plus years of writing and research. I went back to the very first instructional materials that we used, the early evaluation, all the old tools. We have boxes and boxes and boxes of that stuff. I went to a couple of conferences. I did a review of the literature around learning and what we know now about what people need in order to learn, and also all of the changes that were happening in classrooms in terms of technology and in terms of external expectations and what was going on in the lives of students and families and communities. So trying to get a sense of the big picture of what was and what is. What I learned is that, yeah, it's absolutely still relevant. Education is still a human endeavor. It is still a human endeavor, and it requires connections. People are hungry for deep dives into other people's experiences. They're hungry to hear each other's stories. They're hungry to build capacity to better serve their students. They're hungry for how to process what I always called accidental challenges, those things that happen in class that are problems, that you didn't structure ahead of time, but you feel like there's a teachable moment there, but you just can't quite figure out how to make anything of it. And so it feels like a missed opportunity. One teacher told me that she and her colleagues are hungry for radical inspiration, which I just thought was lovely. Radical inspiration. And so I also learned that where we had, in the past thought, holding up a mirror up to teaching, teachers are teaching content and they're teaching process. But really, again, based on what I observed watching teachers at work and what I heard from them as they were describing their experiences, they're actually teaching academic, social, civic, and personal well-being content all the time. So it's not just teaching the content, but they also have to teach students how to be together. They have to teach students how to be part of a community, how to adhere to the social contract, and then also how to take care of themselves and how to take care of the people around them. 40 years ago, the idea of doing academic and social was mind-blowing. No one was doing it. And now we have to figure out how to more clearly articulate that these four things are actually happening all the time in classrooms. And then our critical skills community has to figure out how to support that in a way that makes it really clear what's going on, what teachers are doing. Because one of the things that we always want to make sure we do is honor what's happening in classrooms. There's so much that happens that people aren't aware of, that teachers aren't even aware of. And the more we can surface that and say, like, look, there's this happening and this happening and this happening and this happening, the complexity of the classroom becomes much more clear. And there's value in that. When people start to understand how complex something is, they honor it more fully. I think about, when we first started to understand the human body and what it took to care for the human body, we started honoring the folks who were caring for this complex system in a different way, because we understood that the thing they were working with was really complicated and that it was hard to manage all the pieces. And so we're trying to hold up that same mirror. The other thing that we discovered is that we have growing edges. We need to center equity and belonging as core, not as something that is implied across all of our work. We already value collaboration and communication and problem solving, but now the next step is to make identity and cultural responsiveness and shared power explicit in our work. We need to integrate trauma responsive and well-being centered pedagogies. Students and educators are navigating unprecedented levels of stress, and we can explicitly incorporate tools for co-regulation, group safety, and sustainable workload into our work. And some of that is in our current materials. It's been added to the materials during this last revision, and some of it we still have to figure out how to do. We have to expand from this idea of project-based learning or problem-based learning as individual events, as separate events, to this idea of a challenge ecosystem where everything in the room is potentially a problem to be addressed. Everything lives within the tools that we have to use. We've always used problem-based learning as our frame, but a lot of teachers fall back to project-based learning because that's what they're used to. depending on how you're using the language, there can be like a 90% overlap in what you're doing between project and problem-based learning. But for a lot of teachers, the project is the thing in the front, and the learning sort of lives around it. What we want to do is flip that so that the problem, because we feel like problems have a little more urgency to them, solving a problem. If I do a lot of embroidery and a lot of gardening. And if I have a project that I'm working on with either one of those things, and I have a problem that I have to solve, I'm going to prioritize the problem, right? And so we want to put the problem first, but we also want students and teachers to recognize that the whole classroom is an ecosystem where all of those tools that they're learning how to use could be of benefit. And then the last piece, we need to embed digital and AI literacy into collaborative problem solving. We have those things embedded. It is a tool. All technology is a tool, just like this is a tool or this is a tool. But we don't articulate it as clearly. And so we just need to be more transparent about not just using the tool, but also the challenges that emerge when you're using digital tools, particularly around ethical decision making. So that's where we need to go. That's our next step. Now, some of it's already in place. Those first two, we've already started rethinking the collaborative learning community, which is one of our foundational pieces, one of those 4 pillars. For the image on the left represents what we've used for a long time in terms of explaining to folks how community evolves, how it develops over time. You can see the image on the right has not just those stair steps, but also an underpinning of safety, regulation, and repair. Because we know what we're discovering, what teachers were telling us was that students couldn't come in at the knowledge stage. They couldn't come in and tell us, here's my name. Here's what I like to do for fun. Even here's how many pets I have. Or if I have pets, here's what I prefer mustard over mayonnaise. They weren't safe enough in their emotional systems to be able to even have those interactions. So first we have to make sure everybody feels safe, they understand how to regulate themselves, and that the adults in the room are able to regulate, and then also how you repair a relationship when you've damaged it. What do you do when you accidentally hurt somebody's feelings? We used to expect kids to come in knowing a lot of this stuff, but we can't count on it anymore. We have to be prepared to teach it. And then trust also includes equity and belonging. This idea of rightful presence, which is something that we're just now starting to work with, that really focuses on this idea that we don't include people. Inclusion isn't the right language. Everybody has a right to be in this space together. We all belong. So if I start from that belief, how does that change the way I design my curriculum, the way I move through my day, the way I move through a class period? And then at the top of the stairs, where we used to have just community, maintenance, taking care of your community, there's also this idea of personal well-being and community care. How do we take care of ourselves so that we can take care of each other? How do we incorporate tools for co-regulation and group safety? Again, that sustainable workload idea. How do we help students and teachers to be co-learners so that they recognize that they are supporting one another in all different systems? This next piece, it has to do with this idea of what makes a challenge. I mentioned before that we've been very problem-based, and we use this language of challenge to describe a critical skills unit of study. And it's, we use that loop to sort of describe that experience. And I'm going to show a little bit different version of that here in a second. But we've always just had these sort of 4 levels of challenge. There's a basic challenge, which is just about learning how to do a challenge. It's about learning processes and systems and procedures in a way that's problem-based. And academic challenges, which are just the first idea of, hey, you've learned how to do some problem solving. Let's do something academic with that, usually with either previously understood content or content that feels very accessible, so but it's purely academic and begins to fold in skills and dispositions. So now we're practicing not just vocabulary around the systems of the body, but we're also working on collaboration or communication, and we're practicing that in a very intentional way. The next level is the scenario challenge, which is always fun because those are the ones where we pretend to be something else. We're archaeologists from the year 2055, and we are 2555, and we've traveled to this part of the world to uncover something, or we are astronauts on Mars. And it allows us to sort of apply content in ways that are imaginative and maybe beyond the scope of our current experience. And then the last form that we've always worked with has been the real world problem to solve. Back in the day, we called these learning by real problems, or LBERPs. And now real world problems. Those are the ones, where students are working out in the world. They're solving real problems in the community, but they could also be solving real problems in their classrooms or solving real problems in their school. Community can mean a lot of different things. So, doing a real world problem doesn't have to mean collecting water samples that you're going to present to the city council. A real world problem could also be when we come in from recess, we have a giant pile of wet, mucky boots and mittens and snow pants, and they don't dry. And then when we have to put them on again for a second recess or to go home, everything's a mess. How do we solve that problem? What can we do so that everybody's mittens aren't mixed up and wet and when they go to put them back on? So that's a real world problem too, even though it's only in the classroom. And we're thinking about this idea of an emergent challenge, which sort of builds on emergent curriculum, which is the curriculum that emerges out of student interest and need. Usually it's at the early childhood level or the primary level. But an emergent challenge would be a way that we reflect on or prepare for an unplanned experience, so that you can deepen. I have a typo on my slide, so that you can deepen your academic content, your skills, or your dispositions. So things like a fire drill, or a visitor, or you have a guest speaker that you didn't know was happening. Or you have an opportunity for a field trip very last minute. Somebody's parent is going to come in and share some information about a tradition they have in their family. These are things that you can't always plan for way in advance. So how do you grab that teachable moment? What do you need to do in advance of that? How can you use your tools to process that and make the most of it? And then, just as we want to have happen in all critical skills experiences, transfer that learning to the next experience. The next piece is this thinking about rethinking the experiential cycle. If we know that community is built through meaningful work, every engagement is an opportunity to build community. So how do we think about problems to solve throughout the day through this engage, explore, create, and reflect sequence? How do we use tools like our existing critical skills tools, or digital tools like AI in this ecosystem? where do those pieces live? Are they in the explore piece? Are they in the create piece? What about in the reflect piece? So that we can more intentionally embed that all the way through. We also need to rethink what I think of as our skill strands, our skills and dispositions. Again, because words matter, right? The words we use matter. And so when we talk about collaboration, we can talk about collaboration, or we can talk about collaborative leadership, which is maybe a little bit more of what we mean. When we talk about communication, well, we're talking about this kind of communication, but we're also talking about multimodal and digital expression, right? So there are ways that we can fine tune our skills and dispositions so they better reflect what we really mean with those words. So basically, when we think about critical skills, it can look like this moving forward. We still have to figure out how. And that is where, a lot of our community comes in, because this is, again, all by teachers for teachers. So we've been building new pathways for our community, social media, building external relationships through like Edutopia and ISTE ASCD. We built a new website that was part of my sabbatical work. We have a newsletter that goes out once a month that allows me to disseminate some information. And this 3 Good Ideas thing that we've put together that is a way to highlight work that teachers share. Some of these are one-way channels about sending out information, but we want them all to be two-way channels as well. Our leadership community right now has about 25 people in it. We'd like it to be bigger than that. We'd like to have more folks who are feeding into to the work. But we know that people are busy, and so we take what they give us. I actively solicit and compensate teachers when they have challenges that they're willing to let us disseminate, let us share. If they develop new tools, we just did a set of things around rituals and traditions, and some folks gave me some great ideas of some things that they do in their own classrooms, and we were able to disseminate those as well. And then, of course, we've been putting together books. I have spent the last couple of years actually updating. This is a smattering of what we currently have. I believe at this point there's something like 17 ebooks that are available. Some are also available in hard copy. And they're also available as PDFs. So the ebooks and the PDFs are free. We want people to be able to access them no matter what. The hard copies do cost because we have to pay to print them. But we try to make things available in forms that people can actually access and use. There's also Kindle versions, and those cost because they're disseminated through Amazon, as are the books. I wish there were a different place to disseminate them through, but Amazon is the only one doing print on demand right now. So this is another way that we're sharing. The great thing about this structure is that as we get new stuff, any of these books can be updated. They can be, as we update, we either update the ebook directly, and then the PDF gets updated as well. The Kindle and the hard copies, those take longer to update, but we try. And I see there's some stuff in the chat. I assume you'll let me know if those are questions.
Yeah, I just found the link to the books on the Antioch site, so I put that in.
Oh, great. Thank you. So what I'm still wondering, because, we're constantly in that cycle, right? Reflect and connect. What I'm still wondering is this idea that came up in one of my conversations about the idea of making class versus taking a class. And that when we make class, we make it together. When we take a class, it's one way. And so how does that play into critical skills in our work together? Because I think what we really want to do in our classrooms is make class. We want to be creating this stuff together as a community. I also want to be able to figure out how to reemphasize the teacher as a co-learner. I think the teacher is the most important person in the room. The most important student in the room is the teacher. And I don't think teachers always give themselves credit for that. They're learning. Their working conditions are their learning conditions. And so the conditions that they would expect to provide for their students, they also have to be ready to provide for themselves. When we talk about keeping students in their zone of proximal development, the number of times I hear teachers say, well, I'm not really ready to do this myself, but my students really want to, so we're going to do it. And I think, well, why would you do that? If you knew your students weren't ready, but you really wanted to do it, you wouldn't do it. You would know it was a bad idea. If you're not ready, honor that. You're a part of the learning community as well. You count. And so take care of yourself in the same way that you would take care of your students. Plan for your own learning in the same way that you plan for your students. Make space for yourself as a learner in the classroom because you're already doing it, but you're cramming it in around the edges and it's exhausting. So make the space for it. So because it matters. You wouldn't tell one kid, you don't matter as much. You're going to go sit in the back and I'm just going to squeeze you in where I can, right? You'd never do that. So don't do it to yourself. And then the last piece is a question that, is a piece that we're always asking. How can we better reflect the realities of teaching? How can we hold up a mirror to what's working so that we can share it elsewhere? How can we support teachers in experimenting so they can figure out what works for them? And how can we provide support for teachers who are trying to figure out how to do things so they don't have to do it by themselves, but they also don't have to find themselves online at 11 o'clock at night, frantically searching for a way to teach something because they don't have a community to fall back on. We want people to have a community to fall back on. So this is one of my favorite quotes about critical skills. And I'm never sure actually if Allison was the person who said it. We were in a big conversation and I attribute it to Allison Robinson, who's a teacher at Monadnock, but I'm not sure. And it's this idea that there are plug and play approaches to teaching. There are models, right? And there's the whole fidelity of implementation thing. And if I walk into a classroom and you're doing X, it should look like this all the time. And what I love about critical skills is that we have never been that. It's an approach. But if I walk into 10 critical skills classrooms, I expect to see 10 different incarnations of the work. And I hope that I see some stuff I've never seen before. And that's how we get better. That's how it continues to evolve. That's how we can say by teachers for teachers, because this is supposed to be that great big box of Legos that you get from your cousin that has like Legos and Tinker Toys and half a Barbie and a couple of hair ties and maybe some Tinker Toys and Lego or Lincoln Logs thrown in, maybe some Army guys and little plastic farm animals. You never know what you're going to get. And so you build something that nobody's ever seen before. So we do have this summer a face-to-face immersion in Keene. I'm putting up the link here if folks are interested in learning more. It's available as a graduate course or it's available as not a graduate course. You can, register as just an auditor or a person who just wants to come. And this link actually takes you to the, we're starting a waiting list because registration hasn't opened yet for summer, but we want to make sure that if folks want to put themselves on the list, they can. And we also know that sometimes folks have to get like an invoice way in advance, or they have to have certain information in order to get their professional development funds allocated or whatever they have to do internally. So if they're on the list, they're in touch with us. And so they can say, hey, I need you to send me the syllabus, or I need to send, the learning outcomes or whatever. So it's there if folks are interested. Yeah, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have now. I just dumped like a ton of information. But it's 40 years back. Now we've got 40 years forward to look at.
Wow. Okay, you certainly have
Yeah.
given us a lot of information, and it was nice to hear, even 40 years in an hour was really quite wonderful. We have a small audience tonight, so I invite anybody who would like to turn on a mic and ask a question, please to feel free to do that. And if you are not wanting to speak aloud, you're welcome to type it in the chat, and I'm happy to share. Anyone? No, well, I will share that I think I'm in my first institution that also has critical thinking administrators. I may be in the first place I've ever been that I feel like that kind of support is there, that no one is expecting every classroom to be matching the picture on the Lego box. And that's pretty rare. That's pretty rare. I
Yeah.
think.
It's interesting because when I first started teaching, back when dinosaurs roamed the planet, we were expected to sort of design our own curriculum in a lot of ways. Like you had a textbook and you had some materials, but it was pretty much all up to you. And then No Child Left Behind came along, and things got more and more standardized and more homogenized.
Mhm.
And now we're seeing more and more teachers who actually can't imagine what it would look like, and more school leaders who can't imagine what it would look like if teachers were able to just design curriculum based on what their students were interested in alignment with standards, but
Right.
not dictated by a pacing guide or a scope and sequence guide. Um, and I think we lose something when we take away that creativity, because teachers know their kids, you know your students and what they need and what they're interested in, what they're passionate about.
Yeah, and it's interesting that a lot of online materials came just at the time that No Child Left Behind came. So a lot of people I know were very torn between open education resources that they could pull together and being on a pacing guide where somebody walked in on Friday and they had to be on a certain page. So that's interesting. I have never been given curriculum in any job I've ever had anywhere. At the same time, it's kind of daunting because most teachers aren't trained as curriculum writers.
No, no,
So
they're
if that really
behind.
is the direction that we finally are able to go, then undergrad programs need to have a lot more of that, how to build a curriculum. AI is certainly helping with that in a way that we've never had support and
Oh
scaffolding
yeah.
before. I find that wonderful.
Yeah, and the challenge design work that we do with teachers, is some curriculum design, because it's
Mm,
looking at, the standards that you have and the skills and dispositions you want to target, and then figuring out what problem students could solve with it. So that's a huge part of the work that we do.
mhm.
And I gotta say, I sat at ISTE 2 years ago. I sat down in a workshop. It was a comparative workshop looking at, like, at the time, I don't know, all the AIs. It just seemed like we had Gemini and Chat GPT and Copilot and Magic School, and there was another one.
School AI, Claude.
Yes, Claude, that was the other one. And we were sitting at tables, and each person got assigned a different AI, and we all had to do the same search, but using different tools. And that was the first moment I really got my head around what this could do. And so I jumped in between, prompts, because what is a workshop if you don't, also do your own stuff while you're listening to the presenter? And I had it write me a challenge, and it did a beautiful job. I mean, I had to tweak a little bit, but I asked it to write a third grade problem-based challenge using the critical skills approach that integrated fractions, pollinators, and I think I said the American Revolution. Like, I was just
Wow.
throwing stuff out, and it came up with a really wonderful challenge about, I mean, again, I had to fix it a little. But basically it was a scenario challenge where you were playing the role of um, uh, a colonist, a white colonist. It was still, it was still well, it was colonial because it was colonial, right?
But that's accurate.
Yeah,
In
a
that
settler.
particular case, that's an accurate.
Yeah, a settler who
Mhm.
was trying to set up beehives for a population of this number of people, knowing that each person needed this amount of honey, and each hive would produce this amount, and how many square feet do they need for each hive. I mean, the math got a little more complicated than I think was really third grade appropriate, so I had to change my prompt to sort of take out some of the variables. But it came up with a really nice challenge that I think a third grade teacher could take and use and modify. They'd have to modify.
Mm.
But yeah, it was a really surprising thing, because if I were going to sit down and write that challenge, it would take me a day.
Oh, easily,
Probably.
if not reading all the books, that helped you get all the information first.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
it did it almost immediately. And I didn't ask it. Now I would know to ask it to give me picture book titles, and to, help me find some good videos or scenarios that, and I would probably prompt it to also include Indigenous peoples as
Mhm.
part of the as part of the challenge in some way. But I was sitting in the back of the room listening to a presenter, or working, with a presenter, and I didn't have that much time to think about it.
We learned about, in our last webinar, we learned about a UDL AI tool specifically for teachers. I think it's called Ludia, which I'd never heard of before. So I played around with that one as well. Those things are quite interesting. Yeah, I'm using it all the time for all kinds of things. Um, I feel like I'm honored to have today. I just did with my high school class. This is how many days we have left, and we can do this, or this. What would you like? I mean, I have that freedom to do that in the school where I am now. Um, these will all be useful to you. What do you want to spend your time on? This course is for you, not for me. So I have the opportunity to do that for the first time and maybe the last year of my career. But yes, so I'm excited about doing those things.
Yeah.
That's pretty great. Again, I offer up the opportunity to ask Laura a question from the audience. Um, I'm not really seeing anything in the chat. Um,
Well, I'm putting my email address in the chat as well. So
okay.
if anything comes up, if anybody has a question, it's also on that last slide. I think, yeah. Um, so if you have a question, if something comes up, or if you're trying to access a resource and for whatever reason it's not working for you, we do have on the yeah, you got that. The resources for the Critical Skills Classroom link. So there are links to all the books. There are also links to white papers and blogs. Every month I send out a newsletter called Connections, which has usually I write a little letter, short, maybe like 200, 300 words. and then share a bunch of links on that topic, a bunch of resources. And if we have new books or new materials that are available, I'll put them in there as well. This month I shared, we have 2 new books that are tools books. One that is just tools for teachers, and one that is a tools book for students to use. So it's largely stuff that you would like Xerox or you would put up on your smartboard, so that folks could look at them together, but you would maybe want them to have them, hard copy in their hands. I'm becoming a big fan of anything that makes kids do this. Because what we're finding is that they get to college and they don't have the hand strength to actually write, to take notes. And we're starting to learn more about how digital stuff is great and really useful, but the process of writing seems to help people retain information better. It really helps students learn. And so, but they don't have the hand strength to do it for very long. So hard copies where they have to write have sort of become my new thing, or my new old favorite thing. So those, we just sent out links to those for folks so that they could download them.
Could you also say more, Laura, of the group that you're looking to expand, the Critical Thinking Teachers Group?
Yeah, the Critical Skills Leadership Team. Natalie, actually, I see Natalie is here. She's actually one of our leadership team folks. And the leadership team does a lot of different things. They're largely teachers who have done critical skills. They've done the immersion, or they did the master's degree, or their certificate. We have all of these different things. And they do this work in their classrooms, and they want to sort of go to the next level. So it's sort of the same as being like an ISTE community leader, or an ASCD community leader. Reach out to me and say, hey, I think this is a thing I want to do. And we
Is it someone that needs to have been through one of the Antioch programs?
Ideally, you want to have done the immersion or have done something similar. I do have a couple of folks who we have one leadership team member who actually is very involved in the Modern Classrooms project, which has so much overlap with what we do in critical skills. We have a couple of folks who were graduates of our integrated learning program at Antioch, actually. And then we have folks who are doing similar work in other areas, but who are interested in sharing resources. They're interested in sharing materials. They've created a great tool and they want to help, they want to get it out into the world. So they share it with me. And like I said, we compensate folks as best we can for their time and for what they share with us in terms of resources and materials. Natalie has done like yeoman's work on editing and reading and giving me feedback. I've had several other folks who have done illustrations or have shared challenges they've written or tools they've done. And then we also have folks who present, who write articles on other topics or co-author articles. Neil Yorath and I just had a piece on Edutopia about chunking, which is taking a big problem and breaking it down into parts, and how you do that. Yeah, so people who have different ways that they want to help support this effort. Our goal is to make this available to as many teachers as possible, so they can use it in whatever way makes sense for them, with the hope that they will also share it with other teachers. Which is why we try not to charge for the materials. We do have to charge for the immersion just because, we have to pay our facilitators. But we charge the same amount for the immersion, actually, that we have since about 1988. And if we go into a school and do it, the price is the same as it was in, I want to say it was in 89, maybe. No, we work really hard to keep it as inexpensive as we can.
Wow. Okay, so we have 2 live audience members tonight. As I said, a tiny, tiny group. So I would love to offer both of you the new book. And if you could put in the chat whether you want a digital copy or a physical copy. The digital copy, I think I would order and would need an email address to gift it to you, or a physical copy, and you can put your street address in. I'm not sharing this chat with anyone else. So you could send that to me and I would be happy to get a book to you. So
And
please feel free.
the ebook is just it is a Canva file. If you do there's a Kindle version as well, which is the one that you have to pay for from Amazon. And then there's also the PDF, which, the only downside of the PDF is that you can't, none of the videos play, but there are QR codes, so you can still access the videos, but that's the big downside there. And then that's the same for the books, the hard copies of the books.
Okay, so I have one person saying physical, please. I'm going to give you my email address and you can send it to me in an email. newenglandlearns.org.
Oh, Sheila, that's a
do
great
that.
question.
And then I have that there. I'm then gonna stop talking for a minute and put my screen back up.
Sheila asked about where we have the most participants. We have everything from early childhood all the way up to college. Right now, I would say we have a lot of middle school teachers who are on our leadership team, and then also school leaders and folks who are in they're not in K-12 classrooms, but they're in what I call allied spaces. So they're school coaches or consultants, or like Natalie working at a community college. So we have folks that are one person who runs their own nonprofit that's supporting schools. Yeah, so sort of all over the map in terms of those levels. But
Sounds
right
like a
now,
wonderful group.
I'd really love to have more lower elementary folks, and I would love to have a couple of math folks and maybe a special educator on our leadership team, just because we are short of resources in those areas. So
Okay.
have someone to share that stuff with us.
Well, thank you, Laura, for an amazing presentation. Thank you, Sheila, for helping to moderate. Thank you, live guests and visitors watching the recording, for joining us tonight. We now have over 90 webinars archived, most of them still as New England ISTE, but they are all available in the archives on our website, newenglandlearns.org, anylearns.org. This webinar will be archived in about 2 hours if I don't need to edit it too much. Our next webinar will be on Wednesday, December 10th, coordinating efforts to drive powerful AI adoption. And that is with the organization that was formerly known as the Learning Accelerator, which has also changed its name. This is the year of everybody changing their names. It's now called Full Scale Learning. Dr. Beth Holland, Ashley Fellows, and Michael Ham will be presenting for them. Check our website for more information, anylearns.org. If you have suggestions for speakers or topics, please contact me. Thanks for joining us. To earn a certificate of completion, if you're watching the recording, you can go to our archive page and go to the exit ticket and fill that in. It's a 1, 2, 3, something you learned, something you still have a question about. And if I can't answer the question from my review of the audio and video, I will actually contact Laura and ask her if she can help us with the correct answer to your question. Watch on the website for new webinars. I'm adding to the winter and spring calendars now. And thank you very much for attending. So I'm going to stop sharing. I hope those of you in the audience who have asked for a book are sending me that information. And thank you very much, Laura, for another great webinar.
Oh, thank you. It's always
been really fun. I've learned a lot, and I will go back and review all the things I didn't catch the first time around.
There was a lot of stuff there.
There's a lot of stuff.
And are you going to Orlando?
I do not think I'm going to Orlando. I'm waiting for Isty to come to Boston next. The last I was in was Denver, where I think you were as well
Oh.
2 years ago, and that was awesome.
Yeah, I didn't know that they were coming to Boston next.
They are coming to Boston in 2027.
Wow, now that,
Yes, very exciting.
very exciting. Okay.
Okay, I'll say goodnight to everyone. Again, thanks for coming. See you soon, I hope. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.